Welcome to Deduction Junction, where mysteries unfold and every detail holds a clue. Step into the brilliant mind of Hercule Poirot, the world's greatest detective, as we journey through his most intriguing cases. With logic sharper than a razor and an eye for the smallest detail, Poirot unravels crimes that leave others baffled. Get ready to immerse yourself in a world of suspense, deception, and of course, the little gray cells. The investigation begins now. The pianist who vanished. It began, as many intriguing cases do, with an unexpected letter. The envelope, cream-colored and sealed with an elegant monogram, had been placed upon Poirot's breakfast tray at Whitehaven Mansions. Hastings, as ever, was halfway through his morning toast and marmalade when he noticed Poirot examining the note with great interest. "A summons to yet another baffling case, Poirot?" Hastings asked, watching as his friend's eyebrows lifted ever so slightly. Poirot delicately unfolded the letter. "Ah, mon cher Hastings, but this is no ordinary request. It is from Lady Margaret Lytton Gore." Hastings frowned. "Lytton Gore? Why does that name sound familiar?" Poirot gave him a knowing glance. "Because her late husband, Sir Rupert Lytton Gore, was one of the finest pianists in Europe. His sudden death last year was most unfortunate." Yes, Hastings said, nodding. "I remember now. A heart attack, wasn't it?" Poirot's fingers tapped the letter. "Oui. But what is most intriguing is not the past, Hastings, but the present. Lady Lytton Gore is writing to request my assistance in a most curious matter. It appears her personal pianist, a certain Mr. Claude Roberts, has vanished without a trace." Hastings nearly dropped his spoon. "Vanished?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "Just so. Disappeared from Lockwood Manor in the middle of a private performance, in front of a room full of witnesses. Lockwood Manor stood at the edge of Surrey, an imposing structure with ivy creeping over its stone facade. The house had long been the residence of the Lytton Gore family, and though once known for its lavish soirees and musical recitals, it now carried the heavy air of mourning. Poirot and Hastings arrived in the late afternoon, where they were promptly greeted by Lady Margaret Lytton Gore herself. A woman of striking poise, she retained an air of elegance despite the shadow of grief upon her face. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, clasping his hands, "thank goodness you came. This whole affair has been simply ghastly." Poirot gave a polite bow. "Lady Lytton Gore, c'est un honneur. Now, you must tell me everything, sans omission." She nodded. "Let us speak in the drawing room. I have gathered those who were present at the recital." As they followed her through the dimly lit corridors, Hastings whispered to Poirot, "Rather unusual case, isn't it? A pianist simply vanishing?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Mais oui, Hastings. A man cannot simply disappear into thin air." Gathered in the grand drawing room, 6 individuals sat in tense silence. Lady Lytton Gore introduced them in turn. Mr. Henry Pemberton, a solicitor and longtime friend of the family. His expression was grave, his hands folded tightly in his lap. Miss Evelyn Harper, Lady Lytton Gore's secretary, a sharp-eyed woman with an air of quiet efficiency. Dr. Lionel Graves, the family physician, a balding man with an air of detachment. Alfred Briggs, the butler of Lockwood Manor, standing near the fireplace, his demeanor one of quiet unease. Miss Camilla Prowse, a young concert pianist who had been a guest at the recital. She sat stiffly, her hands clutching the armrests. Sir Charles Worthington, a retired colonel with an imposing moustache, his arms crossed impatiently. Lady Lytton Gore turned to Poirot. "They were all present in the music room last night when Claude Roberts vanished." Poirot inclined his head. "Très bien. Let us begin at the beginning." Lady Lytton Gore took a deep breath. "Claude had been playing the Moonlight Sonata. He played it perfectly, every note in its place, as always. Then, just as he was about to begin another piece, the candles flickered." "The candles?" Hastings repeated. Lady Lytton Gore nodded. "Yes, a draft, I thought." But in that instant the room grew oddly still. The next thing we knew, he was gone. Hastings looked baffled. Gone? But how? Miss Evelyn Harper, the secretary, spoke for the first time. That is precisely what no one can explain, Captain Hastings. One moment he was there, seated at the grand piano, and the next, the bench was empty. Poirot clasped his hands, and no one saw him leave. Mr. Pemberton, the solicitor, cleared his throat. The only doors in the music room were locked, from the inside. The windows were shut, and there is no concealed passage in the walls. Dr. Graves, the physician, scoffed. It's utter nonsense. The man must have slipped out somehow. He probably had some trick planned to amuse us. Poirot's gaze sharpened. And yet, he did not return. Lady Littengore shuddered. No. And now, nearly 24 hours later, we have heard nothing. No note, no ransom demand. It's as if Claude ceased to exist. Poirot paused, considering. And what of the pianist himself? Tell me, Lady Littengore, what sort of man was Claude Roberts? There was a brief silence. It was Camilla Prowse, the young pianist, who spoke next. Her voice trembled. He was brilliant, but he was also terrified of something. Hastings's brows shot up. Terrified? Camilla swallowed. Yes. The last time I spoke to him, he said something odd. He said... Her voice wavered. Poirot leaned forward. He said what, mademoiselle? Camilla hesitated, then whispered. He said, I know the truth now, and they will never let me leave. A sharp silence followed. Poirot's eyes glittered with intensity. Ah, he murmured. Then, mes amis, we are not merely searching for a missing man. He straightened, his voice growing firm. We are searching for a man who knew too much. The locked room, enigma. Heavy silence followed Camilla Prowse's whisper. He said, I know the truth now, and they will never let me leave. For a long moment, no one spoke. The crackling fire in the hearth cast flickering shadows upon the faces of the assembled guests, adding to the unease hanging over Lockwood Manor. Poirot finally broke the silence, his voice gentle but insistent. Mademoiselle Prowse, he said, fixing his sharp gaze upon her. When did Mr. Roberts say these words to you? Camilla hesitated. It was just before the recital. He was pacing near the window in the green room, hands trembling. He looked... She shuddered slightly, haunted. Hastings frowned. And did you ask him what he meant? I did, she admitted. But he just shook his head and muttered. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Poirot's mustache twitched slightly. Ah, mais non, mademoiselle, that is where he was wrong. His dark eyes glimmered with intrigue. I believe everything. It is merely a question of whether the details align with the truth. Jap, who had been listening with an air of skepticism, cleared his throat. Well, that's all very dramatic, but let's focus on the facts, shall we? We have a man who vanished from a locked room in front of at least 6 witnesses. No doors were opened, no windows broken. The fellow simply ceased to exist. He exhaled loudly. That, Poirot, is impossible. Poirot turned to face him, his expression unreadable. Then, mon cher Jap, we must ask ourselves, when something is impossible, what does it mean? Jap blinked. It means, it didn't happen? Poirot nodded. Non, mon ami, it means we are looking at it the wrong way. With Lady Littengore's permission, Poirot, Hastings, and Jap moved into the music room, the very place where Claude Roberts had last been seen. It was a grand chamber, its wooden floors gleaming beneath the golden glow of the chandelier. The black grand piano, its polished surface untouched, stood as an eerie centerpiece. Along the far wall, heavy crimson curtains framed a pair of French doors leading to the terrace, but these had been bolted shut. Jap muttered, hands on his hips. So, let's think this through. 6 people saw him sitting here playing the piano. The lights flickered for an instant, and when they steadied, he was gone. Hastings glanced around. But how? Even if he wanted to vanish, where could he have gone? Poirot walked slowly across the room, his patent leather shoes clicking against the polished floor. Observe, Hastings. The doors were locked from the inside. The windows were shut and latched. And yet, someone removed themselves, or was removed, from this room. He stopped by the piano bench, running his gloved fingers lightly across the surface. No scuff marks, he murmured. No sign of struggle. He crouched down, peering beneath the piano. No footprints. Hastings frowned. Are you thinking he left by some hidden passage? Japp scoffed. The manor doesn't have one. I checked the floor plans myself. Poirot straightened, smoothing the lapels of his jacket. Then, mes amis, we must think differently. If there is no physical escape, then either his dark eyes glittered. He did not leave at all. Or someone made it seem as though he had. A shiver ran down Hastings's spine. Poirot, you don't mean... Poirot's gaze fell upon the piano keys. He reached out, pressed a single note, and listened as the sound rang through the empty chamber. Then softly he said, I mean, Hastings, that Claude Roberts may have never left this room at all. Let us examine what we know, we? Poirot said, addressing Hastings and Japp. 6 people witnessed the disappearance. Each claims that Claude Roberts was here one moment, gone the next. But let us look at what they actually saw. He turned toward Japp. Tell me, mon ami, who was the last person to see him sitting at the piano? Japp scratched his chin. That'd be Miss Harper, the secretary. She was sitting closest to him. Poirot nodded. Très bien. We shall start with her. They summoned Miss Evelyn Harper back into the music room. The secretary entered, her demeanor as composed as ever, though there was a flicker of unease in her eyes. Monsieur Poirot, she greeted stiffly. You wish to ask me something? Poirot gestured to the piano bench. You were seated here, yes? She nodded. To the left, near the fireplace. And when the candles flickered, where were you looking? Miss Harper frowned. At Mr. Roberts, of course. Bien. And tell me, did you actually see him vanish? She hesitated. I saw him sitting there. And then the light flickered, and then he was... gone. Poirot's head tilted. So you did not see him vanish. You merely saw him before and after. Miss Harper's lips parted slightly. Well, yes, I suppose so, but no one saw him leave either. Non, Mademoiselle Harper. Poirot gave a satisfied nod. And that is exactly why I know what happened. Japp and Hastings stared at him. Miss Harper's face paled. You know? Poirot smiled. Mais oui, I know exactly how Monsieur Claude Roberts vanished. Third. A trick of the eye, a stunned silence followed Poirot's quiet declaration. I know exactly how Monsieur Claude Roberts vanished. Japp straightened, arms crossing, over his chest. Well then, Poirot, don't keep us waiting. Out with it. Miss Evelyn Harper, the secretary, still looked pale, her eyes darting to the piano bench, as if half expecting Roberts to suddenly reappear. Hastings, ever the eager observer, leaned forward. Do you mean to say, Poirot, that he never really left at all? Poirot's moustache twitched. Précisément. And yet, at the same time, he was gone before the lights flickered. Japp let out a gruff laugh. That's absurd. Either the man was there or he wasn't. Poirot gave an indulgent nod. Ah, mon cher Japp, but have you not heard the expression, the eyes see only what the mind expects? Poirot turned back toward the piano. He ran a gloved finger along the smooth surface before addressing the group. Let us consider, step by step, what occurred in this room. Monsieur Roberts was playing, the audience listening in rapture. Then the candles flickered. His sharp gaze flickered to Miss Harper. Tell me, mademoiselle, When the light dimmed for that fraction of a second, was the piano music still? "Playing?" Miss Harper frowned. "Well," she hesitated. "Yes, I believe it was." A murmur spread through the room. Poirot nodded, satisfied. Exactement. The music never stopped. And yet, when the light returned, the pianist was gone. Japp sighed. "So what's your point, Poirot?" Poirot lifted a single finger. "My point, mon ami, is that we were deceived. Monsieur Roberts never vanished at all, because he was never there in the first place." A gasp ran through the assembled witnesses. Miss Harper's mouth opened and closed. "But I saw him. We all did." Poirot smiled faintly. "You believed you saw him." Hastings frowned. "But how could that be?" Poirot stepped toward the piano bench. "Because, mes amis, you were watching a shadow." Poirot gestured toward the heavy crimson curtains by the terrace doors. "Imagine for a moment a man sitting at a piano, playing with a strong light source at his back. The candlelight in this room, for instance, positioned just so." Hastings followed Poirot's gaze to the ornate chandelier above the grand piano. The flames from the candelabra flickered faintly. "A shadow!" Hastings exclaimed. Poirot smiled. "Oui, a carefully crafted illusion. The real Monsieur Roberts did not need to be at the piano at all. He merely needed to position himself so that his shadow played for him." Japp gave a skeptical look. "That's a good trick, Poirot, but how do you explain the music still playing when the lights flickered?" Poirot turned back to the piano. "That, mon ami, is the true ingenuity of the deception. The music was pre-recorded." Another gasp. Lady Lytton Gore looked horrified. "Pre-recorded?" Poirot nodded. "Oui, milady. A hidden phonograph, placed carefully near the piano, played an identical rendition of the Moonlight Sonata. The moment the lights flickered, the real Claude Roberts slipped away, leaving only his shadow behind for a few fleeting seconds." Japp whistled. "Clever. And no one would have questioned it, because we expected him to be there." Poirot tapped his temple. "Just so. The human mind fills in the details. When the light returned, the shadow was gone, and thus so was the man." Miss Harper still looked stunned. "But where did he go?" Poirot's sharp gaze fell on the heavy curtains behind the piano. "I believe we shall find our answer behind those drapes." Japp stepped forward, yanking the curtains apart. Behind them, the terrace doors remained shut and locked, but just to the left, nestled against the wall, was a small recess. Poirot stepped toward it and crouched. "Aha!" His fingers closed around a small metallic object. He held it up for all to see. A phonograph needle. Lady Lytton Gore let out a soft gasp. So it was true, the music wasn't live. Poirot turned the needle over in his fingers. "No, but more importantly, it means that Claude Roberts did not leave the manor." Hastings stiffened. "What do you mean?" Poirot turned slowly to face them all. If this had been a staged act, if Monsieur Roberts had been a willing participant, he would have left a clear escape route. He held up the needle once more. But if he was forced into this deception, if someone made him play this role under duress, then his vanishing act was not meant to be his escape. Hastings exhaled. "You mean?" Poirot's voice darkened. "I mean, mon ami, that Claude Roberts did not run away. He was taken." A tense silence gripped the room. Japp ran a hand down his face. "Good Lord, Poirot. You're saying this wasn't just a trick, it was an abduction." Poirot folded his hands. "That is precisely what I am saying, mon ami." Lady Lytton Gore's voice was barely above a whisper. But who would do such a thing?" Poirot turned toward the group of witnesses, his gaze slowly sweeping across their faces. Then he spoke. "The better question, milady, is this. Who had the most to lose?" If Claude Roberts were to speak. A tense pause. Then, a single nervous cough. All eyes turned toward the source of the sound. Mr. Henry Pemberton, the solicitor. The man paled under the scrutiny, his fingers twitching against the armrest of his chair. "What? Why are you looking at me?" Poirot gave a small smile. "Because, Monsieur Pemberton, I believe you know exactly why Claude Roberts disappeared." Fait. A solicitor's secret. All eyes turned to Mr. Henry Pemberton, the solicitor. The sudden attention caused his hands to tighten against the armrest of his chair. His normally composed face betrayed a flicker of unease. He cleared his throat, shifting slightly. I don't know what you mean, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot, ever the master of observation, noted the slight tremor in Pemberton's voice. He stepped forward, clasping his hands together. "Ah, but I think you do, monsieur," Poirot said pleasantly. "For when I asked who might have had the most to lose should Claude Roberts have spoken, it was you, and you alone, who reacted with nervousness." Japp crossed his arms. "Go on, Pemberton. What aren't you telling us?" The solicitor's lips pressed into a thin line. "This is absurd. I had nothing to do with Roberts's disappearance." Poirot lifted a single finger. "But you knew something, n'est-ce pas? Something about Monsieur Roberts that none of us here yet understand." Lady Lytton Gore, who had been watching the exchange with an increasing sense of alarm, finally spoke. "Mr. Pemberton, if you have any knowledge of what happened to Claude, you must tell us." A heavy pause. Then, with a resigned sigh, Pemberton removed his spectacles, rubbing them against a handkerchief. "I did not want to speak of this, Lady Lytton Gore, because I feared it would only add confusion to the matter. But yes, Claude Roberts had come to see me the very morning of his disappearance." Poirot's expression remained impassive. "Continuez, monsieur." Pemberton inhaled deeply. He was troubled. He wanted to alter his will. A gasp came from Camilla Prowse, the young pianist. "His will?" "Yes." Pemberton glanced at the others. "I had handled some of Roberts's legal affairs in the past. He told me he wished to make some changes to his beneficiaries. He was, how do I put this, afraid." "Afraid?" Hastings repeated, eyes widening. Pemberton nodded gravely. "Yes. He told me that someone had been watching him, that he had recently discovered something dangerous, and that if anything happened to him, he wanted to ensure that his assets were properly distributed." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And did he say what it was that he had discovered?" Pemberton hesitated. He refused to tell me outright. He only said that it was tied to Sir Rupert's death. A tense silence settled over the room. Lady Lytton Gore clutched the armrest of her chair. My husband's death. But Rupert died of a heart attack." Pemberton sighed. "So it was ruled, milady. But Claude Roberts suggested otherwise. He believed Sir Rupert had been murdered." The room erupted into murmurs of shock and disbelief. Japp raised a skeptical eyebrow. "So now we're saying Sir Rupert didn't just die, but he was killed? That's quite the accusation." Poirot, however, was silent, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of satisfaction and concern. "Tell me, Pemberton," he said softly, "did Roberts say who he suspected?" The solicitor shook his head. "No. He was about to tell me more when we were interrupted. He seemed terrified. He muttered something about too many eyes in the room and said we would have to speak later." Poirot steepled his fingers. "And that conversation never happened." Pemberton's shoulders slumped. "No. I received a note later that day saying he would speak with me after the recital. But then he vanished." Hastings frowned. "If Roberts had proof that Sir Rupert was murdered, wouldn't he have gone to the police?" Pemberton hesitated. "That's what puzzled me as well. But he said something odd before he left my office." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "What was it, monsieur?" Pemberton licked his lips. He said, "I cannot trust the police. Not yet." Japp's brows furrowed. Why the devil wouldn't he trust the police? Poirot hummed thoughtfully. That, mon ami, is a most interesting question. Hastings shifted uncomfortably. But what does this mean, Poirot? Are you suggesting that Claude Roberts was silenced, perhaps even killed, because he knew too much? Poirot's fingers tapped lightly against his chin. Ah, non, mon cher Hastings. That would be too simple, too neat. No, I believe Claude Roberts is still alive. The room fell silent once more. Camilla Prowse's voice was barely above a whisper. But where? Poirot's expression was unreadable. That, mademoiselle, is what we must now determine. Before anyone could respond, a sudden noise echoed. From the hallway, a soft crash, followed by the hurried sound of footsteps. Japp reacted first. "Who's there?" he barked, moving toward the door. Poirot raised a hand. "Wait." Stepping forward, he approached the door slowly, placing a hand against the polished wood. Without hesitation, he pulled it open. A figure stood in the hallway, a tall, thin man, his breath shallow, his clothing rumpled. His eyes were wild with fear. Camilla gasped aloud. "Claude!" V. The man who knew. Too much Claude Roberts stood in the dimly lit hallway, his breath coming in short, uneven gasps. His clothes were rumpled, his cravat askew, and his eyes, usually calm and expressive, were wide with terror. Camilla Prowse took an instinctive step toward him, but Poirot's sharp voice cut through the moment. "Arrêtez!" She froze. Poirot's gaze never left Claude Roberts. He studied the pianist as one, might a delicate piece of evidence. Then, in a voice soft but firm, he spoke. "Monsieur Roberts, you have returned." Claude swallowed. I never truly left." Japp, ever the man of action, stepped forward. "Right then, we'll be needing an explanation. Where have you been?" Claude opened his mouth, hesitated, then staggered forward as though his legs might give out beneath him. Hastings rushed to steady him. "Good heavens, man, are you hurt?" Claude shook his head. "No, just exhausted. I've barely eaten in 2 days. I had to hide." A collective murmur spread through the room. Poirot regarded him keenly. "Mais oui, you hid. But from whom, Monsieur Roberts?" Claude's hands clenched into fists. His voice trembled. "From the one who killed Sir Rupert." They moved quickly to the drawing room, where Claude Roberts collapsed into an armchair. His fingers trembled as he accepted the brandy Lady Lytton Gore pressed into his hands. Poirot sat across from him, fingers steepled, his gaze unreadable. "You are safe now, monsieur. Speak." Claude exhaled a shaky breath. "You must believe me. I never meant to cause this commotion. I only vanished because I knew they were coming for me." Japp frowned. "Who?" Claude swallowed. "I don't know exactly. But 2 nights before the recital, I found something. Something that proved Sir Rupert was murdered." Lady Lytton Gore let out a strangled sound, her hand flying to her throat. Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And what precisely did you find?" Claude's hands tightened around the glass. "A letter, hidden in Sir Rupert's old desk." A ripple of shock spread through the group. Hastings leaned forward. "A letter from whom?" Claude exhaled. "From Sir Rupert himself." Claude produced a folded slip of paper from his coat pocket. It was creased, stained, and bore the unmistakable mark of having been hidden away for some time. He handed it to Poirot, who took it with the utmost delicacy. "Dated. The day before his death," Poirot murmured, unfolding it. The room held its breath as he read aloud. "If anything should happen to me, know this. It was not fate, nor illness, nor accident. It was planned. And the one responsible is—" Poirot stopped. The next line was torn away. A collective exhale rippled through the group. Jap muttered a curse. Convenient, that. Claude nodded. The letter was half-burned, stuffed into a hidden compartment in his desk. Someone must have tried to destroy it and then forgotten it. Poirot's fingers traced the edges of the paper. Not forgotten, mon ami. They assumed it was gone. Camilla, voice barely above a whisper, asked, Who would do such a thing? Claude's jaw tightened. I don't know. But when I found the letter, I knew I was in danger. Someone didn't want this to be discovered. Poirot leaned forward slightly. When you read this letter, monsieur, what was your first thought? Claude hesitated. That Sir Rupert must have been poisoned. A startled gasp came from Lady Littengore. But that's impossible. The doctors confirmed it was his heart. Claude shook his head. I believe that was what the killer wanted them to think. Sir Rupert had no history of heart trouble, and he was in good health. Hastings frowned. But if that's true, then how did the killer manage it? Claude hesitated. That's what I haven't figured out. I was hoping to find more evidence. Jap let out a long breath. Let me get this straight. You found this letter, decided you were in danger, and instead of going to the police, you orchestrated this vanishing act? Claude nodded. I knew I wouldn't make it out of the house otherwise. Someone was watching me. Poirot tilted his head. And so, you disappeared. Claude swallowed. Yes. Poirot tapped his fingers together. And yet, monsieur, you did not tell us who you suspected. Claude's throat bobbed. His fingers tightened around the armrests. Poirot's voice turned silken, dangerously quiet. Tell me, Monsieur Roberts, who do you fear the most in this house? A thick silence settled. Claude slowly turned his gaze toward a single figure, Mr. Henry Pemberton. The solicitor stiffened. What nonsense is this? You can't possibly suspect me. Claude's voice was hoarse. You were the only one who knew I had found the letter. Jap narrowed his eyes. Wait a minute. Are you saying Pemberton knew about this? Claude nodded. The day I found the letter, I went to him. I needed legal advice. I needed to know if I could prove murder. Pemberton let out a strained laugh. This is preposterous. Poirot held up a hand. And what did you say to Monsieur Roberts? Mon cher Pemberton, the solicitor hesitated. I advised him to be cautious, of course. It's a serious claim to make. Claude's hands clenched into fists. That's not all. You told me, his voice faltered. Poirot's eyes gleamed. He told you not to pursue it, n'est-ce pas? Claude nodded. He said, some things are better left buried. A chill settled over the room. Lady Littengore's voice was sharp. Mr. Pemberton, is this true? The solicitor hesitated for a fraction of a second too long. Poirot smiled ever so slightly. Monsieur Pemberton, I would advise you to speak carefully. Pemberton's face reddened, his jaw tightening. I was merely trying to protect the Littengore name. Hastings blinked. Protect it? From what? The solicitor exhaled. Sharply. From scandal. Do you have any idea what would have happened if rumors of murder had surfaced? The newspapers would have had a field day. Poirot studied him for a long moment. Then, very softly, he said, You are lying, Monsieur Pemberton. Sick. The first lie exposed. The tension in the drawing room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Hercule Poirot, ever poised, ever composed, watched Henry Pemberton with an expression of quiet triumph. His words still lingered in the air. You are lying, Monsieur Pemberton. A sharp intake of breath came from Lady Littengore. Mr. Pemberton, she said, her voice trembling, I insist that you explain yourself at once. The solicitor's face had paled beneath its usual ruddy complexion. His fingers twitched at his sides. This is absurd. Poirot did not blink. Ah non, mon cher monsieur. What is absurd is that you still attempt deception when you are already caught. Jap, standing with his arms crossed, let out a low grunt. Might as well come clean, Pemberton. You're not getting out of this one. Pemberton's eyes darted toward the door. Poirot caught the glance and gave a slow shake of his head. Do not attempt to leave, monsieur. It will not do. Claude Roberts, still shaken but gathering his composure, spoke hesitantly. You told me not to say anything. You told me to leave it buried. Pemberton scoffed, but his voice lacked confidence. Yes, I advised caution. That does not make me a liar. Oh? Poirot tilted his head. Then allow me to pose a question, monsieur. Where were you on the night Sir Rupert died? A pause. Pemberton's jaw tightened. At my home. Asleep. Poirot's moustache twitched. Bien sûr. But you forget, monsieur, that your home is in London. And Sir Rupert died here in Hampshire. The room fell deathly silent. Jap narrowed his eyes. That's a bit of a journey, Pemberton. You mean to say you were nowhere near Lytton Gore Manor that night? Pemberton's throat bobbed. That is correct. Poirot gave an almost pitying smile. Then you would not mind if I were to ask Lady Lytton Gore a question? He turned. Milady, did you not tell me earlier that Mr. Pemberton was in the house on the evening of your husband's death? Lady Lytton Gore stiffened. Yes. He dined with us that evening. A sharp intake of breath from the group. Claude Roberts clenched his fists. So you were here that night. Jap let out a slow whistle. Lying about your whereabouts, Pemberton? That's a bad look. The solicitor's face flushed red. I forgot. I was only here for a short while. Poirot's voice was silken, deadly calm. A short while? Non. The staff say you remained well past supper, even taking brandy with Sir Rupert before he retired. That is quite a long while to forget, is it not? Pemberton staggered back, his knees nearly giving out. This is preposterous. You're twisting facts. Poirot merely observed him. No, monsieur, I am uncovering them. Hastings, watching the scene unfold, shifted uncomfortably. Look here, Poirot. Are you saying that Pemberton... Poirot held up a hand. Not yet, Hastings. I do not yet say anything except that Monsieur Pemberton has concealed the truth. Lady Lytton Gore, looking rather shaken, turned toward her solicitor. Henry, you were my husband's trusted friend. I demand to know what you are hiding. Pemberton's shoulders sagged. Before he could answer, a loud knock echoed through the room. Everyone startled. A footman entered, looking uncomfortable. Pardon me, milady, but there is a detective from London here. Jap straightened. A detective? Yes, sir. The footman swallowed. He says he's here to investigate the death of Sir Rupert. A ripple of shock went through the room. Lady Lytton Gore gripped the edge of her chair. But Sir Rupert's death was ruled natural. The footman hesitated. Yes, milady, but the Scotland Yard man says he has reason to believe it was murder. Jap strode toward the footman. Show him in. The footman disappeared, only to return moments later with a tall, broad-shouldered man in a dark suit. He had a square jaw, piercing eyes, and a manner that exuded quiet authority. Detective Inspector Graves, the man introduced himself. Poirot, ever polite, inclined his head. Ah, and to what do we owe the pleasure, Inspector? Graves's sharp eyes scanned the group before he spoke. 3 days ago, a private autopsy report surfaced in London. It suggests that Sir Rupert's cause of death was tampered with. Lady Lytton Gore's hand flew to her mouth. Tampered with. What are you saying? Graves's gaze settled on her. Madam, I regret to inform you that Sir Rupert did not die of natural causes. The room was dead silent. Jap rubbed his jaw. You're saying he was poisoned then? Graves exhaled. I'm saying that traces of digitalis were found in his remains. A murmur swept through the room. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Aha. A poison often used to simulate heart failure. Graves nodded. Exactly. And what's more, he turned toward Claude Roberts. The report indicates that someone attempted to retrieve the body 2 nights ago. Claude Roberts blanched. The weight of the statement hung heavy in the air. Jap was the first to recover. Hold on, you're saying someone tried to steal the body? Graves nodded grimly. Yes, which means someone was desperate to keep the truth buried. Hastings glanced nervously at Poirot. This is bigger than we thought. Poirot, fingers tapping lightly against his chin, murmured, Oui, mon ami. Much bigger. Lady Littengore's voice was strained. Inspector Graves, do you have any suspects? Graves turned his gaze toward Pemberton. The solicitor, perhaps. He had access to Sir Rupert's affairs. He was here on the night of the death, and he was seen speaking in hushed tones with Roberts just before he vanished. Pemberton turned a shade paler. This is ridiculous. Claude Roberts stood. His hands were shaking, but his voice was clear and determined. No, it isn't. His gaze locked onto Pemberton. You knew, didn't you? You knew Sir Rupert had been poisoned. Pemberton's mouth opened and closed. Poirot rose slowly from his chair. Monsieur Pemberton, I will give you one final chance to speak the truth. Pemberton's lips pressed into a tight line. Poirot's gaze turned steely. Très bien, then you leave me no choice. He turned toward Graves and Jap. Gentlemen, I believe it is time we conduct a proper search of Monsieur Pemberton's belongings. And when we do, I suspect we shall find exactly what we need to close this case. 7th. The search for the truth, Henry. Pemberton's face had turned a shade paler, his stiff posture betraying the tension in his frame. His lips parted slightly, but no words emerged. Poirot watched him with a measured gaze, his eyes gleaming with certainty. The great detective had laid his trap, and the solicitor had walked straight into it. Detective Inspector Graves folded his arms. Well, Pemberton, you have something to say for yourself? I resent this, Pemberton finally managed, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. You cannot just search my belongings on the basis of baseless accusations. Poirot tilted his head slightly. But they are not baseless, Monsieur Pemberton. You have lied to us about your whereabouts, about your knowledge of Sir Rupert's affairs, and about your involvement with Claude Roberts. Jap let out a dry chuckle. Face it, Pemberton. You look guiltier by the minute. Pemberton's protests went unheard as Jap and Graves signaled to the footman to bring down his belongings from the guest quarters. The servants moved quickly, their expressions uneasy. As a small trunk was placed onto the center table, Poirot stepped forward, brushing his fingers lightly over its worn edges. Tell me, Monsieur Pemberton, he said conversationally, what would we find in here if we were to open it? Pemberton's jaw tightened. Nothing of importance. Rien d'importance, Poirot mused, his fingertips sliding across the brass clasp. He turned to Graves. Would you do the honors, Inspector? Graves obliged, clicking the latch open and lifting the lid. Inside, there was a neat arrangement of documents, clothing, and small personal effects. But it was the small wooden box, nestled between the folded shirts, that caught Poirot's eye. What have we here? He reached in, lifting the box with delicate care. It was locked. Jap smirked. Now, that's suspicious. Pemberton took a step forward, his face a mask of controlled panic. You have no right. Graves cut him off. We'll see about that. He retrieved a small set of keys from Pemberton's coat pocket, and after trying 2, clicked open the lock. Inside lay a collection of letters, tied with an old ribbon. Lady Littengore inhaled sharply. Rupert's handwriting. Poirot extracted one letter from the bundle, unfolding it carefully. His sharp eyes scanned the words, and then he smiled. Mais oui, Poirot murmured, his voice laced with satisfaction. At last, the truth. Lady Littengore's voice trembled. What does it say? Poirot cleared his throat, reading aloud. To whomever finds this, know that my time is running short. I have made a grave mistake, and I fear I shall pay for it soon." A gasp echoed through the room. "Years ago, I uncovered a terrible truth about a man I once trusted. If this letter is read, know that I have been silenced. The one who should not be trusted, the one who will stop at nothing to hide his crimes, is—" Poirot stopped. The final line was smudged, blurred beyond recognition. Japp let out an exasperated sigh. "Not again!" Claude Roberts, voice tight with frustration, ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Who could have done this? Someone must have tried to destroy it." Poirot carefully folded the letter. "It is no accident, mon ami. The smudging suggests a deliberate attempt to erase the name, while leaving the letter intact to avoid suspicion." Graves scowled. "But it proves Sir Rupert was murdered," Lady Lytton Gore whispered. "My poor Rupert." He knew. Pemberton's voice was hoarse. "You still have no proof it was me." Poirot turned his keen gaze to him. "Ah, but that is where you are mistaken, monsieur." He gestured to the letters. "These were written before Sir Rupert's death, and yet you kept them hidden. If you were truly his loyal solicitor, why did you not bring them to the attention of the authorities?" Pemberton hesitated. Poirot's voice softened, but there was no mistaking the steel beneath it. "Because you knew, did you not? You knew Sir Rupert had stumbled upon something damning. You could not afford for anyone to see these letters." Jappy exhaled. "That's obstruction at the very least." Graves nodded. "And given the circumstances, it looks an awful lot like motive." Pemberton took a slow step backward, his fingers twitching at his sides. You cannot prove I killed him." Poirot raised a finger. "Ah, but we can prove that you lied about his death." Pemberton froze. Poirot took a step forward, his eyes locked onto the solicitor. "You claimed Sir Rupert died of natural causes. You insisted there was no foul play." His voice lowered. "And yet, you, Monsieur Pemberton, had knowledge of this letter." Pemberton's breath hitched. "You knew Sir Rupert had a reason to fear for his life. You knew he was looking into something. And yet, you never spoke of it." A cold silence filled the room. Pemberton stared at Poirot, his face pale as wax. Japp stepped forward. "So what's it gonna be, Pemberton? You want to explain yourself down at Scotland Yard?" Pemberton's eyes darted wildly around the room. He licked his lips. I need a moment to think." He lunged for the door. Graves and Japp moved at the same time. "Hold it right there." But before they could grab him, Pemberton threw himself forward, knocking over a chair and sending papers flying across the floor. Poirot, ever composed, did not move. Instead, he calmly turned toward Claude Roberts and whispered, "And now we shall see who comes to his aid." Claude blinked. "What?" But Poirot was watching. And in that moment, when Pemberton stumbled, gasping, toward the exit, one other person in the room reacted without thinking. A sharp gasp, a movement toward him, a single misstep that revealed everything. Poirot's smile was infinitesimal. Aha. The trap had sprung, and Poirot now knew who the true killer was. 8. The web of deceit. Unraveled. The air in the drawing. Room was thick with tension. Pemberton had been caught in his lies, yet it was not him whom Poirot watched now. No, it was the one who had reacted instinctively when Pemberton stumbled toward the door. A single mistake, but enough. Poirot took a slow step forward, his voice measured and precise. Aha, the truth. She is at last within our grasp. Claude. Roberts shifted uncomfortably. Lady Lytton Gore's hands trembled at her sides. Pemberton, momentarily forgotten, stood frozen near the door. Japp, who had recovered his footing, shot Poirot a sharp look. "You mean to tell us that Pemberton's not our man after all?" Poirot smiled faintly. "Non, mon ami. Monsieur Pemberton is guilty of deceit, certainly, but he is not the one who killed Sir Rupert." A ripple of shock passed through the room. Claude Roberts frowned. But he had those letters. He hid the evidence. Poirot raised a finger. Oui, but ask yourself, why? Claude hesitated. Poirot continued. Because he knew Sir Rupert had stumbled upon a secret, and because he was terrified of what the truth would mean. Lady Littengore, her face pale, swallowed. Then, who? Poirot's sharp gaze swept the room before settling on a single figure. A figure who had, moments ago, instinctively moved to help Pemberton escape. Margaret Ashby. The pianist's delicate hands were clasped together tightly, her knuckles white. Poirot studied her. Mademoiselle, you are a fine actress. Margaret's mouth parted, but no words came. Poirot took another step forward, never looking away from her. You were in this house the night Sir Rupert died. You were here when he retired to his study. And he glanced at the others, his voice dropping lower. You were the one who poisoned him. A sharp gasp from Lady Littengore. Margaret's shoulders jerked slightly, but she recovered quickly. That's absurd. Japp narrowed his eyes. Is it? Margaret turned to Lady Littengore, her voice strained but controlled. Milady, you know me. I played at your husband's side for years. You cannot think me capable of… Poirot cut her off. Ah, but that is precisely why you could do it. The room was silent. Poirot's voice was soft, yet firm. Sir Rupert trusted you implicitly. He let you into his home. He let you see his private papers, his accounts. And when he began to suspect something, when he uncovered the truth about what had been done, you knew your time was running out. Margaret's throat bobbed. Claude Roberts was staring at her in horrified realization. My God, you… Poirot held up a hand. Shall we go through it logically? Poirot clasped his hands behind his back and began pacing slowly. Sir, Rupert had been investigating something concerning his piano compositions and the money missing from his accounts. Lady Littengore murmured. He did say he was worried about something. Poirot nodded. Indeed. And who had access to those compositions? Who handled his finances when he became ill? His eyes landed on Margaret. Japp scowled. So that's it. You were stealing from him. Margaret flinched. Poirot went on, his voice relentless. When Sir Rupert began putting the pieces together, you had to act. He was planning to confront you, was he not? Margaret's lips trembled. No, Poirot tilted his head. That night, he sat in his study after supper. He took his usual brandy, prepared as always by you. A sharp exhale from Margaret. Poirot nodded. Oui, mademoiselle. But that time the brandy was laced with digitalis, a slow, quiet poison, easy to disguise as a heart attack. Claude let out a strangled breath. And she let us all think it was natural. Poirot's gaze did not waver. Because she knew no one would suspect her. Margaret let out a shaky breath. This is madness. Poirot's brow lifted. Ah, then allow me to ask you, why did you move to help Pemberton just now? Margaret stilled. Poirot's voice was mercilessly calm. Because you knew that once he was caught, the focus would fall on you. Margaret's chest rose and fell rapidly. Graves stepped forward. That's motive and opportunity. Japp nodded. And given that Pemberton's been hiding the truth, I'd wager he's known for a while. Haven't. You? All eyes turned to the solicitor. Pemberton, who looked as though he had aged 10 years in a single evening, sighed deeply. I suspected, but I didn't want to believe it. Poirot nodded. Ah, but the truth does not need belief to exist. It simply is. Lady Littengore's voice was faint. Margaret, why? Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I had no choice, she whispered. Claude shook his head in disbelief. No choice? You could have walked away. Margaret let out a bitter laugh. Walked away? After everything I sacrificed? After everything he promised me? Lady Lytton Gore stiffened. Promised you? Margaret's lips twisted. Rupert owed me. He promised me recognition, a future in music beyond playing in his drawing room. But instead, he used me. Poirot's expression darkened slightly. Margaret's voice grew hysterical. He stole my music. He passed my compositions off as his own, and when I confronted him, he laughed. He told me I was nothing without his name attached. Lady Lytton Gore sank into her chair, shaking. I had no idea. Margaret's voice was barely above a whisper. So I made sure he would never laugh at me again. A heavy silence descended upon the room. Poirot exhaled softly. Mon Dieu. Japp pulled out his handcuffs, his face grim. Margaret Ashby, I'm arresting you for the murder of Sir Rupert Lytton Gore. Margaret's shoulders sagged in resignation. I suppose, she murmured. That's the final curtain. Aye, the truth and the final curtain. Margaret Ashby sat, rigid in her chair, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The moment the words had left her lips, there was no taking them back. The weight of her confession hung over the drawing room, pressing down on all who were present. Inspector Japp stood before her, his hand resting on the handle of his handcuffs, but he had not yet moved to use them. He watched her with a look of both grim satisfaction and something akin to pity. Poirot, ever the picture of composure, gently smoothed the lapels of his jacket. Mademoiselle, he said softly, it is a tragedy, n'est-ce pas? Margaret laughed bitterly. You call it a tragedy, Monsieur Poirot. I call it justice. Lady Lytton Gore covered her mouth, her eyes filled with unshed tears. I cannot believe it. After all these years, you could have told me. Margaret turned to her, her expression hard and defiant. And what would you have done, milady? Protected me? Given me credit for the music that was rightfully mine? Lady Lytton Gore flinched, her fingers curling into the folds of her skirt. Claude Roberts, his face pale, shook his head in disbelief. But murder. You took his life. Margaret let out a shuddering breath, her voice unsteady but unwavering. And he took mine. For years, I played his pieces. I composed at his request, only to see my music stolen, passed off as his own. He promised me everything, and in the end, he left me with nothing. Poirot tilted his head slightly, observing her with quiet intensity. You say that he stole from you, but tell me, mademoiselle, would you have killed him if he had not? Begun to suspect you? Margaret's lips pressed together in a thin line. Poirot continued, his voice now gentle yet probing. If Sir Rupert had not found out about the missing funds, if he had not intended to expose you, would you still have done what you did? A long silence stretched between them. Margaret finally lowered her gaze. I don't know. Poirot sighed softly, as though he had already known the answer. Japp took a step forward, removing the handcuffs from his belt. Miss Ashby, I have to place you under arrest. Wait. Lady Lytton Gore's voice was barely above a whisper, yet it carried across the room like a thunderclap. Japp turned, frowning. Milady, she drew in a shaky breath, staring at Margaret with a mixture of grief and understanding. I do not condone what she has done, she said slowly. But I cannot let this end without acknowledging the truth. Her gaze softened. Margaret, I should have known. I should have seen it. The way he spoke of his work, the way he dismissed you so often, I was blind. Margaret looked away, her hands clenching in her lap. It doesn't matter now. Lady Lytton Gore took a hesitant step closer. But it does. You are not the only one who has suffered because of Rupert's selfishness. She closed her eyes briefly. He took your music, yes. But he also took my trust. My belief in the man I thought I knew. Poirot inclined his head ever so slightly, his gaze unreadable. After a long silence, Lady Lytton Gore turned to Jap. "Please, let me see to it that she receives mercy. Let her stand trial, but let the truth be known. Not just that she killed him, but why." Jap sighed, scratching the back of his head. "Milady, the law doesn't deal in sentiment." Poirot stepped forward, speaking smoothly. "Ah, but justice, true justice, is not always so rigid, mon ami." Jap met his gaze, grumbling under his breath, but he nodded. "Fine. We'll take everything into account." He gestured for Graves to step forward, and together they escorted Margaret toward the door. Just before she stepped out, she turned back to Poirot, her voice lower than before. "Tell me, Monsieur Poirot, do you really believe I had another choice?" Poirot's expression remained unreadable. "Mademoiselle, there is always a choice. The door finally clicked shut. Silence filled the drawing room. Claude Roberts exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. What a mess. Lady Lytton Gore lowered herself into a chair, her exhaustion plain to see. Poirot, however, was still standing, his arms crossed over his chest. Jap eyed him warily. "What is it now? We have the confession, don't we?" Poirot did not answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the mantelpiece, running a gloved hand along the ornate clock that stood there. A flicker of something, an unspoken thought, crossed his features. Claude frowned. "Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot turned, his gaze sharper than before. "My friends," he murmured, "something still does not sit right with me." Lady Lytton Gore looked up, startled. "What do you mean?" Poirot hesitated, then spoke carefully. "The letter Sir Rupert wrote. The one we found in Pemberton's possession." The final line was smudged. Claude nodded. "Right. It was erased. To hide the name of the person he suspected." Poirot tilted his head. "Or perhaps, to hide the fact that the name was not Margaret Ashby at all." A hush fell over the room. Jap straightened immediately. "You're not saying—" Poirot raised a single hand. "I am saying that I must think. X." The last note. The silence in the drawing room was heavy. Poirot stood still, hands behind his back, his expression contemplative. Margaret Ashby had confessed. The case should have been over, and yet something remained unresolved. Lady Lytton Gore watched him with unease. "Monsieur Poirot, you don't believe it's finished, do you?" Poirot exhaled quietly. "No, milady. It is nearly finished, but not quite." Claude Roberts frowned. "You can't mean Margaret lied?" Poirot's gaze sharpened. "No. Mademoiselle Ashby was truthful in her guilt. She did indeed kill Sir Rupert." A collective breath was released. "But," Poirot continued, raising a finger, "she did not erase the name from Sir Rupert's letter." A chill swept through the room. Jap leaned forward. "You're saying someone else tampered with it?" Poirot gave a small, satisfied nod. "Précisément. Someone who needed to ensure that Sir Rupert's true final words were never read." Lady Lytton Gore gripped the armrest of her chair. "But who?" Poirot stepped forward and placed his hands delicately on the mantelpiece. "There is only one possibility, mes amis." A pause. Then, his voice dropped, quiet but unmistakable. "The real forger of the letter is in this very room." Jap's mouth fell open slightly. Wait. You're saying that Margaret killed Sir Rupert, but someone else interfered afterward?" Poirot nodded, his gaze locking onto a single figure. Claude Roberts. Claude blinked, startled. "Me? That's ridiculous!" Poirot's head tilted ever so slightly. "Ah, but is it?" Claude shook his head vehemently. "Why would I do such a thing? I had nothing to do with it." Poirot took a slow step forward, his dark eyes shimmering with certainty. "You were the first to claim the letter's contents had been smudged. You directed everyone's attention to it. A clever move, non? To feign surprise over a forgery you yourself committed." Claude stared at him, aghast. I was merely pointing it out. Poirot held up a hand. Ah, but let us think, mon cher. Sir Rupert was planning to expose someone. He left behind that letter, his final testament, and yet the most important line was erased. Why? Claude swallowed hard. Poirot continued smoothly. If Margaret was already guilty, she had no reason to hide it. She had already won. Lady. Lytton Gore stiffened. Claude took a step back. Japp's eyes widened slightly. You mean? Poirot's voice hardened. I mean, the real secret Sir Rupert uncovered was not merely about stolen compositions. It was about financial fraud. Claude went still. Poirot turned slightly toward Lady Lytton Gore. Milady, your late husband's accounts. They were incomplete, were they not? She hesitated. I had thought nothing of it. Poirot nodded. Of course not. Because the missing money was hidden well. And who, pray tell, was Sir Rupert's financial advisor? A deafening silence followed. Claude Roberts exhaled sharply. I see, he said, his voice quiet, almost detached. Poirot watched him intently. You knew. You knew that Sir Rupert had uncovered your theft. And so, when you found that letter, you erased your own name from it. Claude let out a dry laugh. And yet you still had no proof, Poirot. Poirot smiled faintly. Ah, but that is where you are mistaken, mon ami. He withdrew a small piece of paper from his pocket. Claude's expression changed immediately. Poirot unfolded it, revealing a copy of the same letter. Only this time the final line was intact. Jappy leaned over, reading aloud. The one who should not be trusted, the one who will stop at nothing to hide his crimes, is Claude Roberts. Claude went rigid. Poirot clicked his tongue. You see, I knew the original letter was forged, but that does not mean the truth was lost forever. You overlooked one thing, monsieur. Claude's breathing quickened. What? Poirot raised a single eyebrow. Sir Rupert, he was a careful man. He wrote 2 copies. Claude's face drained of color. Japp let out a sharp whistle. Well, that settles it. Claude turned suddenly, his eyes darting toward the exit, but before he could move, Graves and Japp closed in. Claude let out a bitter, defeated laugh. You clever devil. Poirot inclined his head slightly. Merci, monsieur. Japp clamped a firm hand on Claude's shoulder. Claude Roberts, you're under arrest for fraud and obstruction of justice. Claude's shoulders sagged. Well, I suppose that's checkmate. Poirot gave a satisfied nod. Indeed, mon cher. And as they say in chess, checkmate is final. Later that evening, as the storm outside settled into a soft drizzle, Poirot sat in the parlor with Japp and Lady Lytton Gore. She had not spoken much since the revelation. Her tea sat untouched on the tray beside her. Poirot observed her with quiet sympathy. You are troubled, milady, she exhaled heavily. It is a terrible thing, Monsieur Poirot, to discover that one's husband was not the man one thought him to be. And yet in the end, I do not know whether I pity Margaret Ashby or loathe her. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Ah, but that is the nature of human beings, milady. We are never entirely villains nor entirely saints. Japp sighed. Still, 2 criminals in one house. What are the odds? Poirot smiled slightly. Human greed, mon ami. It has a way of bringing together the most unlikely of accomplices, even when they do not know it. Japp grunted. Well, at least this one's over. Poirot lifted his teacup. For us, perhaps. But for Margaret Ashby, and for Claude Roberts, the consequences are only beginning. Lady Lytton Gore closed her eyes. And for me, life must go on. Poirot's gaze lingered on her. Yes, milady, and it will. She looked at him curiously. How can you be so certain? Poirot's eyes twinkled faintly. Because, milady, the music always plays on. The case was solved. Justice had been served. And yet, There remained something unspoken, something lingering beneath the surface. Japp finished his tea and stood. Coming back to London, Poirot. Poirot, who had been studying the rain-streaked window, finally rose. Non, mon ami. I think I shall stay a little while longer. Japp frowned slightly. Why? Poirot turned toward the fire, his face cast in shadow. Because, he murmured, there is still one last note left unheard. The fire crackled softly, and Poirot, ever the perfectionist, intended to hear it.